The September 15th meeting of the Board of Health is now open. We have a quorum of 4. Just to remind you all that this meeting is being recorded audibly and visually for those that may be speaking. Is there anyone present who would like to make a comment or a suggestion on any item that's not on the agenda? Yes. Please do. Just stand up, identify yourself.
I've done this kind of thing before. Hi, Steve Bender, 73rd Street. I want to report on what essentially amounts to a 20-year plus endeavor. Many years ago, many of us on the water were under the impression that the vessels in the boat basin were not being properly pumped and were pumping out, particularly their gray water, into the harbor, right where they were. Okay. Of course, in 2002, the selectmen appointed a subcommittee, Iski Santos and myself, to look into this. And we spent much time with the managers of the boat basin, who at that time was George Bassett and Mr. Cleveland. And they assured us over and over again that everything was perfectly fine, everything was being pumped. And, well, now I'm going to get into what has come to light recently. And the reason we got nowhere is because we weren't really very smart investigators, and we weren't asking the right people. This happened. Now I start. That was my introduction. On August 15th, 2015, I walked down to the boat basin to look at a large wooden 3-masted boat, which I love wooden boats, so I went down there to look at it. It was a beautiful boat. And as I was walking back to go home on Orange Street, I passed a 100-foot boat to my left. And the door to the bridge opened, and a big fellow walked out with a white hat and a white shirt and a white pants and white shoes. And I said, "Sir." He said, "Yes. Are you the captain or the owner of this vessel?" And this was just off the top of my head. I don't know why I did it, but I did it. He says, "I'm the captain." I said, "Can you tell me how you manage your gray water?" He said, "Yes, we dump it overboard, like all the other big vessels in the harbor." I was aghast, although I suspected this. And I said, "How come? That's ridiculous. There's a very, very important and powerful bylaw in the town of Nantucket, as well as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where gray water is considered sewage, against such things." He says, "Look, Mr. Bender," he said, "see those boats?" He points to the 100-footers, 100-plus footers in what I call tax evasion row, the boats from Cayman Islands and so forth. He said, "Those boats have large crews and large numbers of guests, and if you were to pump their gray water, you would have to be pumping them 24 hours a day." He said, "The boat basin has very little and inadequate pumping facilities for gray water." I said, "Thank you." I walked away. I didn't say much about it. I mentioned it to a few of my confidants, and I waited over the winter, and in early summer of 2016, I walked down the dock again, and the northernmost of the very large 100-foot-plus vessels, the northernmost that are perpendicular to the outer bulkhead of the tax evasion row, there was a crew member there, and I said, Hi. I said, "Could you tell me how you manage your gray water?" And he said, "Yes, we treat it, and then we pump it overboard." Of course, if you read carefully, the bylaw, treated and untreated are considered the same. Treated, I said, "Well, how do you treat it?" He said, "Well, the engineer isn't aboard now, so I don't know." but we know how it's treated more or less. They treat it to kill most of the bacteria because that gray water is the effluent from dishwashers, washing machines, and showers. I reported this to Roberto, the health officer, and a few other people, the town manager's office, and the head of the Marine Department. Now, here's the kicker. It's not the kicker. This is just adding to it. 8/7/2016, I get a call from a good friend of mine, who many of you might know. And I wasn't going to use his name, but yesterday he said, "Steve, I want you to use my name because I'm a respected member of the community." Raphael Asona called me. He said, "Steve, I'm invited to a dinner party on a 100-foot vessel in the boat basin." He says, "and I want to bring the oysters." This is one reason why I'm very much concerned about the water quality of the harbor. I have a burgeoning oyster farm, and the water quality is going down, 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 down. I said, "Sure, Raphael, you can have the oysters on one condition." Of course, I'm kidding him. He loves oysters. I said, "You have to ask the captain how he manages his gray water." He said, "Okay, Steve." So a week later, I call him back. I said, "What did the captain say?" He said he dumps it overboard when his tank is filled, like many of the other large vessels. Yesterday, I happened to be down because I do a lot of business at Crew. They buy many of my oysters. And I was talking to the boss there. When I was done, I went out, and the large new ferry was taking off. And I walked out to watch it because it's a big, beautiful thing. And the way it moves, it doesn't vary an inch when they go backwards. I was amazed how maneuverable that thing is because it's in pretty tight quarters. At any rate, while I'm watching it, I see an 80-foot boat parked parallel about 2 bays from Crew. And I see a lady crewman tying some lines up in the bow. This is yesterday. There are not many boats left. And I walk over to her. I say, "Hi. I gave this message to Roberto today. I don't know if he got it." I said, "How do you manage your gray water?" She says, "We have a holding tank." I said, "What do you do when the holding tank is full?" She says, "We pump it into the harbor." Period. This is the tip of the iceberg of extreme pollution of the harbor. And this has been going on for many, many years. Their facilities are minuscule compared to the amount of boats they have there. I would look. Let's look at it logically. If the Jarrett Coffin House and the Overlook and 2 or 3 restaurants dumped their washing machines and their dishwashers directly into the harbor, what would we think? We would go berserk. Yet this is going on. And I want the health department to know, and I want the health department to look into this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comments that from the board or the solutions?
Well, I think as Steve said, this has been going on a long time, and as a practical matter, I think there's been, let's be honest here, somewhat a.
Those mics on up there, please.
They're on.
My
They're
mic's on. I'm not sure that,
They're on.
but maybe it's not going up there.
Yeah, yeah, it's just not. It's not amplifying.
Okay, so
today
we'll have
for
to
some
speak up. I'm sorry. So this has been going on for a long time, and it's quite. My sense is that I saw, for example, an email from the police chief addressing this subject, and we're a little in a difficult spot because it's hard to catch somebody specifically, and you're hard to know what boat and all this kind of stuff. But I think that we've been probably avoiding really dealing with the issue, and we've been taking that course of action for 20, 25 years. So I'm just reporting to the Board of Health that that's kind of been our response. And the, Roberto, you can comment, the bylaw is on the books that says...
Yes, there is a bylaw on the book. Oh, there you go. There is a bylaw on the books from 1988, I believe, that says no dumping of gray water. I believe in the 90s, the harbor was also declared a federal no discharge zone. So it's a matter of starting to enforce that again as well.
So what do we call the other, black water? I'm not sure what the
But-
phrase
yes.
is. You know, we're very proud of the amount of black water we collect in the harbor through the boat basin and the town. So we really, the pump out boat, and we really do a good job there. But this other issue has been around, and you know, it doesn't hurt to bring it up again and try and figure out what the best solution is. It's not an easy solution, everybody. We need to understand that.
I mean, how would you enforce?
The hardest parts with
I mean, we have
enforcing
trouble enforcing fertilizer regulations.
Yes, the trouble with enforcing this regulation is that the boats are considered private property. It's their curtailment. So we cannot get onto the boats without cause. Those causes, and we even then we also have to be allowed on by the occupant. The only other way would be with an administrative warrant. That's the biggest issue. The other way to police this is by using the dye tablets, where you put the dye tablet inside the gray water tank or the black water tank or both, and if they do decide to pump it overboard, it will smear the side of the boat with this bright orange dye, and we can figure out who did it at that point. Once again, same issue. We can give them the dye tablets, but they don't have to put it in.
Well, could we, in the extreme, could we pass a regulation that they have to, if you enter the harbor, you have to put dye in your tanks?
We could pass the regulation, but it's the same thing as we have to now have basically a toll operator at the jetty, stopping every boat as they come in, and having them put in the dye, because we have to catch every single boat that's coming into the harbor. So it becomes a lot harder that way.
Shouldn't they be informed when they come into the marina?
They should be informed, absolutely.
So they're not informed, so they don't know.
I honestly don't know. Honestly,
Well,
don't
the
know.
minimum we can,
Yes.
You know, I think it's clear there are lots of things you can do short of boarding a boat.
Yes.
And
Education is-
you know, all kinds of things, and outreach and
Education
signage,
is always
email. I mean, you know, all kinds of things. But through the boat basin and through other places, there are contacts with the boats where you can remind them more frequently. So it just depends on how much, let's be frank, how much energy and effort the town wants to make in this. And I've never quite seen, Roberto, I hear Steve, but I don't know that we've had a clear-cut report that says because of the gray water, we've got 47 parts of some bad thing in the harbor and it kills the eelgrass. It just hasn't been made clear.
It's really hard to quantify that.
Well, it would be helpful to know what the issues are, even if you can't quantify it. Otherwise, you don't know what you're dealing with. So,
but I mean, if we're cracking down on everything else, like the fertilizer and stuff like that, I mean, I wasn't even aware of any of this.
all right, well, just one more comment, then we'll move on. Yes.
Bruce Mandel, 10 Midland, Nantucket. I'm here to talk about several other issues on your agenda, but this issue is very important to us in Nantucket as well, in the harbor. And it's a difficult issue to try to enforce. Of course, in Nantucket, we don't have as many boats or as large boats. But many of the boats that are in Nantucket do have heads. And we also are concerned about how that water is disposed of. And it's critical in Nantucket because the Sentinel station for measuring nitrogen that we are keying this whole sewer project on is right in Hither Creek, where all those boats overnight. So this is important. I'm not here to suggest any answers to you, but it's something that needs to be focused on a little bit more than it is now. We're concerned about it. It's not a problem that's unique to Nantucket Harbor or Nantucket Harbor. This is an issue in many, many harbors around the country. And perhaps it's a good idea to see how some of those harbors deal with this. And perhaps it's a good idea to step up some of the ways that we can enforce our bylaws. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, maybe, and Steve, you mentioned you were on a group to study this at one point?
Yes. I forgot to mention, that what came to light, which is just the second salient here, and that is that the captains and their crew are forthcoming, and nobody else is. So if you want to confirm all this, you just have to walk around and talk to a few captains. And Mr. Atherton, if you want to know about the effects of surfactants and the various chemicals that are in gray water, call the biology department of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and ask to speak to any professor or particularly the chairman. I've spent hours with him. It's a hideous bunch of chemicals.
Thank you. Well, we won't let this pass, and maybe we'll talk to Roberto. Maybe I always hate to say another working group, but at least a group to look at it.
Talk to the harbor master too. Include the harbor master.
Well, I could see someone like Steve and the harbor master and a couple other people getting together and just working out recommendations.
Yeah, I can get to work on this in the meantime, and then provide a report in October, and then we can decide where to go from there.
October. If you could get us some basic information, then we could get a group together to. I mean, obviously, board every boat in the harbor is the first option, but we have to do something a little more practical. Thank you for bringing that up. It's something I really haven't thought about. Okay, next item, Hummock Pond Cluster Subdivision.
Yes. So the Hummock Pond Cluster Subdivision is up requesting for a nitrogen aggregation plan and a variance from the Hummock Pond IA regulation. There is a presentation in the packet as well as in front of you in a hard copy that Mr. Ross did provide for us. And I will let Mr. Ross explain.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for allowing us to come back and talk again about this. I think the last time we were here, we didn't do a good job in describing what it is we were asking for, so beg your forgiveness for that, and I'll try again this time. In the package, we have a letter from Art Gasparo, who took a look at what we were asking for, and he may want to talk about his position. You may want to have some questions for him, but I'd like to go through this presentation with you, and the reason I gave you a hard copy is I want to say page 1, page 2, page 3, okay? So starting with page 1, in essence, what we're here to talk about is that we have a cluster subdivision. It was put in 72 acres. The houses are 36 lots that have 4-bedroom systems in it that essentially allow for 144 bedrooms, but the 72 acres would allow for 288. Okay, that's sort of like the bottom line there. On page 2, let me just give you a little background on it, and Jim Cooper would know this by heart. It was a cluster subdivision by special permit in 81, and the lots are 3/4 to half acre lots, but it's a 2-acre zone. 55 additional acres were set aside to meet the 2-acre zoning. Those 55 acres have been placed under conservation restriction with the Land Bank and Land Council, so there's no development or anything that's permitted there. Unlike a subdivision that would be permitted today, no formal nitrogen plan was put in place. All the 36 lots were built out with 4-bedroom traditional systems. About 22 are in Zone B, and until recently, failed systems could be replaced with no more than 4 bedrooms. The Hummock Pond Watershed Zone B requires systems meet Title V regs, which means they have to meet the 10,000 square feet per bedroom. They don't require an IA system. So our small lots don't permit that. So Our request is to allocate 13 acres of the credit land in that open space to meet the 10,000 square foot per bedroom requirement, which would then allow people to put in traditional systems. Now, you might ask, why are we saying 13 acres versus 55? By asking for 13 acres, it would cap the amount to the current flows. It wouldn't allow somebody to increase the number of bedrooms. So we're essentially asking for credit land that would keep everybody at 144. But in reality, there's 55 acres of absorption there. Okay, so I think what we're asking is to also take that into account when considering our request. So we could have 288 bedrooms, but we're just saying let's keep it at 144. The next pages show the which I'll get to in a second, the subdivision plan and the water district. The land bank and the land council, who hold the conservation restriction, have approved this idea. I know Cormac Collier specifically wanted to limit it to the existing flow, so that's also where the 13 acres comes from. So the next page just shows you the subdivision. The two circled lots make up the 55 acres, and the other circled area is the credit land. The next page just shows how we're in Zone B. The 22 lots are roughly in Zone B. And once again, we're not asking for, if somebody's system fails, we're not asking for a variance on that. We just want to calculate in the open space as part of the aggregate plan. So the last page, page 6, our summary request is that you approve our nitrogen aggregation plan because it demonstrates that in reality we've got absorption there for greater than the existing bedrooms, up to 288, and to also consider the fact that it would be an economic hardship for people having to put in IA systems when in fact there's a significant amount of absorption land there, and to approve the plan for the 22 lots in Zone B and also the 14 that are outside. So not in the handout I did, but on your laptops there or your iPads, there's a letter from the Land Council where they approved it. So, are there any questions? Jim?
You're not asking for any more bedrooms?
No.
In those 36
If somebody, no, well, I guess I would answer that this way. If somebody wants additional bedrooms, they would have to put in an IA system. Okay, we're not saying somebody can't add on and ask and put another bedroom. We're saying that for people that have an existing 4-bedroom system, if it fails and they're not adding bedrooms, they should be able to replace it. But if somebody got approval to add a bedroom, then today they would have to put an IA system in.
Yeah. So just to be clear on that, the idea is that if one fails, they would put in a standard system, not an IA system.
Right.
So I guess that's the crux
Yeah,
of the issue.
right. And the reg doesn't require an IA system. It just requires that we meet Title V requirements, which is the 10,000 square feet per bedroom. It's not like the other watersheds. Is that right, Roberto?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to look up right now.
I just lost myself there. So the regulation, this is...
If the regulation
B.
provided that, why are we here?
I guess that's why I'm confused.
So I'm not sure that I understand
The
that.
regulation, as I understand it, requires that we meet Title V.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In order to meet Title V, we have to aggregate in that extra land.
Because if a system fails,
They're
they go under the rule there's only one bedroom every 10,000 square feet.
And they're on 20,000 square foot
and
lots.
the people
Or 10,000
in Zone
square foot
A
lots.
would only be allowed to have a 2-bedroom septic system.
Mm-hmm.
So by this, what he's asking for is let's just allow everybody to have a 4-bedroom system by using the aggregate land.
Yeah, we're in Zone B. We're not
Right.
in A.
And if a system fails...
But this is for A and B.
We're only in B.
You're asking only in B.
Only in B. We're not in
Okay,
A.
fine.
There's only one corner of one lot that's sort of in A. We're just talking about B.
Okay.
We're talking about B and outside of B as well. So, but
Yeah, I believe half the subdivision is within B, half of it's out of the watershed altogether.
But we thought we just would ask for the whole subdivision, just
I understand.
clean it up.
So just to be clear again, an aggregation plan was, I guess, not requested 20 years ago for some reason, I guess.
Well, I guess it may not even have existed,
Well,
Jim. I don't.
We never did anything like that.
Right. Well,
Right. It wasn't
I
requested.
think there might be some other aggregation plans on the island, but in any case,
Right.
one was not done here.
Right, 30 years ago.
If
Right.
it had been done, I'm
We
sort of
wouldn't
asking
be here.
Roberto, we wouldn't be here. Is that correct?
We wouldn't be here. The only one would be the only requests that would be the IA request that he's also talking about.
For more than 4 bedrooms.
Yes, for anything above the 1 per 10,000, because
we did this for Fisher's Landing.
because you have town water down there too, or no?
No,
Okay.
we're wells. So we're nitrogen sensitive by definition.
So if you went beyond 4 bedrooms, then you would have to have an IA
Yeah,
system.
right. Which is, yes, right. It's really just a
And if
repair
this-
and replace kind of
And
question.
the
Everything's
present-
built out.
And a present system fails, the IA system.
Right, but this request is saying we would want to aggregate in all the other
I'm
land.
just trying to get it all together in my head.
Okay.
I think the key phrase might be to replace.
Just come up and identify yourself,
Neil.
please.
I'm John Rich. I'm one of the homeowners in the homeowner association out there. The key phrase to keep in mind, I think, is replace in kind. That if a system were to fail, homeowners would be allowed to replace in kind, not have to incur the extra expense of an IA system.
Unless they went to a larger.
Unless
bed-
they exceeded the 4-bedroom limit for their.
Which I believe you're already deed restricted to 4 bedrooms
Yes,
anyway,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yes.
No, that's not the case.
No. Okay.
No, we're not
No?
deed restricted. No.
Oh, okay.
No, because there are some homes I think that expanded and they put an IA system in. We're not asking for an exemption from that. We're just talking about the in
So
place.
the homes that have expanded have already put in an IA system.
Couple of people have,
because
I
they
believe.
to go beyond the bedroom
Yeah,
limit.
right.
Gotcha.
And Roberto, Jim reminds us that Fisher's Landing had
We did this at Fisher's
Ag-
Landing.
an aggregation plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did that for Fisher's Landing, didn't we?
Yes, but Fishers also has IAs.
Right.
But Fishers is a
So I
different
was-
situation,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I
Fishers
just
is
want
a
to be
different-
clear that it is
Mm.
different. But we did, in that case, I don't think we had a specific lot that we had to deal with, right?
No, there was no one specific lot.
I'm trying to remember what we did because we
Yeah.
allow. Do we allow Fishers to do the same thing these
Art
folks
Like
Yeah,
are being
Art
asked
was
to do?
there. Yeah,
No,
Art was present at that meeting.
Yeah, Art,
That was pre-me.
So in Fisher's Landing, what you did was took 5 specific vacant lots that were undersized and granted them with IA, I believe 1 extra bedroom than the IA would give them. And, but you
Right.
required the IA.
See, that's what I wanted to remember. We did
within-
require IAs in that, even though they have an
Absolutely.
aggregation plan.
Well, they didn't
and
have an aggregation plan.
they
They
didn't have
showed
one-
that they could have
They showed they could
370
have
more
one,
bedrooms.
But again, they had never filed one.
They never, same
you
situation.
sort of made.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just want to make sure. And the difference, this is Jim. So if we're requiring IAs, they were doing more bedrooms than those lots could have had otherwise, right?
Yes.
So it's a little bit like here. If they want more than 4, they're agreeing to put in an IA. I'm not sure that's an exact parallel.
Yeah. Say that again?
Well, in we required IA systems in Fisher's Landing.
Because they were undersized lots.
Well, I think these are probably, when you say undersized, I don't think these lots would
These
qualify
lots, when
without
these
the
lots were
aggregation.
built, they weren't undersized at all. So the systems they had in there were fine. Okay, most of those houses are 3-bedroom, but they have a 4-bedroom septic system.
Mhm.
So what happens is now, if one system fails, if the system fails, they have to go back to the 10,000 square foot per bedroom. They would only be allowed to have 2 bedrooms in that house.
Right.
We wouldn't have them tear anything out and cut down to 2 bedrooms. What they're looking to do right now is to codify that.
Right, that's what they're looking to
And
do.
then
So if, just to be, again, go back to Fishers, if someone came in with the same situation in Fishers, would we do the same thing? If the system failed in Fishers with, under the same circumstances you're describing, what would we do there?
if Fishers has a 3-bedroom in the ground with serving a 3-bedroom house and the 3-bedroom fails, they can replace it with a 3-bedroom system. The only what they're trying to do right now is to codify it so
Codify
that
the 4 bedrooms.
10 years from now, 15 years from now, if the rules change, they don't lose the homes.
I'm comfortable with that.
But
Comfortable with that?
Yes, because essentially
I'm very comfortable.
we're doing we're codifying a system that already exists.
And there's plenty of land
That has
to
never
absorb
been-
it.
That has never been officially codified.
Right, right. And there's extra land to absorb it all, so I think the environment's protected too.
And if you want more than 4 bedrooms, then you have to put an IA system.
Right, right.
Any
Okay.
other comments? Can I, let's see, this is essentially we're approving the plan, the aggregate plan. So I need a motion to approve or not approve the aggregate plan for Hummet Pond Cluster.
I'll make a motion that we approve it.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Further discussion?
Well, copy of this plan will go on file, obviously.
Yes.
yes, you'll get a copy of everything.
Okay.
So we've essentially
Mhm.
codified the four bedrooms. If they go beyond 4 bedrooms, you need to put an IA system.
And staff is in sync with this recommendation?
Art doesn't look like he's in sync.
Well, I thought I might ask.
Yeah.
Please.
It's not consistent with what you've done in the past. If somebody on 10,000 square feet in Fisher's Landing with a 3-bedroom system fails, we would require an innovative alternative septic system on that repair. So, and the regulations here also require the same on repair. 56 for Hummock Pond.
Art, I don't think
See,
the
that's
Hummock
what I
Pond
thought.
watershed
That's why I
regulations
just
don't
wanted to make
require
the
that, I
link
don't
here.
think. Excuse me, I just want to.
The
The regulations just require for Hummock Pond watershed that we meet Title V
actually, no. And
for Zone B.
yeah, for on repair, they would require an IA. Actually,
Where does it say that?
Well, I mean,
existing development,
Record.
developed properties
That's what I
shall
thought.
be allowed to repair, replace existing disposal systems for existing flows by a qualified professional with nutrient reducing technologies or a technology acceptable to the board.
And right now, our acceptable board of IA systems is what we've been doing
Yes.
across this island.
So
for the
if
last
essentially the aggregation here would, the aggregation would allow them, will codify that 4 bedrooms, but within the way it's written still now, within Zone B, they would be required to do IAs anyway. So that's the request here, to not do IAs
So
within
it's
Zone
already
B.
codified that they have to replace IAs if it fails. So that's what I thought we were doing,
Okay. No.
or that's what I would prefer to see happen. In other words, codify the 4 bedrooms. If a system fails, it has to be IA, and that's consistent with what we've done in the past.
That was not my understanding. My understanding from the reg was that for Hummock Pond watershed Zone B, we just had to meet Title V.
Yeah, there's a.
I think
It's the
that's
same conversation we've always been having, where Zone A and Zone B tend to fight
Well,
each other.
When we did, I remember
Yeah.
we had long debates about Zone A and Zone B.
We did.
Yeah.
We had a discussion about that, and I thought we said we were only going to do IAs
In Zone A.
Zone A.
Right. I agree.
That's what I remember.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Art Gasparo. I've reviewed their proposal, and I think in an effort for clarity, the crux of the issue is the 1 bedroom per 10,000 square feet. And not having the 10,000 square feet on a per lot basis is what's triggering the need for the IA system, not solely because it's in Zone B. Now, because it's in Zone B, or within simply, doesn't really matter zone A or B, it's in the watershed, the MAP nitrogen sensitive area. So their proposal is asking you, when they say aggregate plan, to look at, if you adopt the aggregate plan, you're essentially giving them credit and taking into account that extra land, so that when you do your mass balance, you do have 1 per 10,000 square feet.
Right.
So I think that might be part of the confusion. In other words, staff is absolutely correct in their interpretation of the regulations. It's not just Title V, it's your local regulation that says if you don't have 10,000 square feet in a nitrogen sensitive area, then you are into an IA. The request here, when they say for the request before you, is to say, look, we could have in this overall subdivision had 288 bedrooms. We're now going to even take 13 of those acres and restrict them so that you don't get the 288. But then when you consider that land, you in effect have the 1 per 10,000. And on that basis is the reason for not doing the IA. So I hope that maybe clarifies what we heard.
But going back to what you just said, I don't think it changes your issue if that's an issue.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's my understanding, and let's go back.
Yeah, I'm
I
trying.
mean,
to
you
read
want to
that.
be. I think there are other aggregation plans, and Fisher's Landing. I'm not sure it has a plan filed yet, but if it did, it would presumably ask for the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, did we do that when they came in, number one? And number two, if they come back, I presume we would treat them equally if it's appropriate, unless there's a difference in the area and where the flows are going. I mean, there might be other factors involved. But
Well, when Fisher's Landing came in, one of those undersized lots wanted like 6 or 7 bedrooms.
Mhm.
And that's why we said, absolutely not. We will make you put an IA system in, and we will give you one extra. I think we gave them,
We negotiate bedrooms.
we negotiated bedrooms with them because they didn't have an aggregate plan filed.
Yes.
They just said, we have enough space so we could have all these
Gave them a
bedrooms.
couple extra bedrooms.
And that's what we did.
and those lots, as I recall, Jim, were not built on.
They were not built on.
Right. So let's go to Fisher's, and with a lot that is built on, and it has, let's say it has 4 bedrooms, and it has a system for 4 bedrooms, and it doesn't have 40,000 square feet or whatever what calls for. What do we do in that case when that system fails?
They would have to file an aggregate plan for a certain amount of land, right? And we would have to follow what we're going to do today.
Right. I think that's what, but I'm not sure we've had that case yet. I'm just trying to be clear that if we're going to do it here, I would think we would
You're
do it
absolutely
there.
right.
And maybe there are others on the island. I don't know. But I think when we were negotiating for the empty lots, Jim, it was different from dealing with the question we're facing right now.
It is different.
So,
Well, the other one we did was Pippin Way, right?
Yes, but it was also a little bit different in that
They had those 10 acres.
yeah, it was something like 12 acres on the other side. It was actually yours.
Sure, I can speak to that. That is a bit different within that same subdivision, and that included the IA systems off the bat. So this discussion is a bit different than that. If I could just add, Mr. Chairman, while there is a subtle distinction when we talk about nitrogen aggregation plans as well in Title V and the local regulations. So there's quite a process to go through in order to meet a nitrogen aggregation plan under Title V than what we're talking about here, which is simply essentially considering this more like a local aggregation plan related only to the local regulation. And just because someone puts in an IA system, that doesn't open up to any number of bedrooms. There are specific, Mass DEP has issued approval letters for specific technologies that essentially allow you to have 6 bedrooms per 40,000 instead of 4. So when we start talking about the lots in this subdivision, perhaps getting an extra bedroom by adding the IA, they still have to meet that loading formula that essentially is the 660 gallons per day per 60,000 square feet instead of 440 per 40.
I got you.
So
Okay.
Let me ask one more question. The 13 acres you've set aside, that's a one-shot deal, just for those 36 houses to have 4 bedrooms. So then, if they want an IA, they don't have the aggregate to have an extra bedrooms. We would have to.
if I may,
Yep.
Sure. Then on that basis, they still have to meet Title V. And because that 13 acres isn't an aggregation plan going through Mass DEP, on a per lot basis, they can't exceed the loading rate. You know, in other words, you would, if you had a 40,000 square foot lot, then you could only get up to 6 bedrooms by adding an IA. You wouldn't be using the 13 acres. That would be based on the standalone of that one, of the individual property's lot area. And if they didn't have 40, let's say it's a 35,000, then they're only going to get 5 bedrooms. It's only going to be a 1 bedroom bonus. So the 13 acres doesn't come into play with adding the additional bedrooms. The 13 acres is really related to essentially being credit land under the local regulation to demonstrate that in essence there is 10,000 square feet per bedroom for the IA under the local reg. And it's a unique situation, but that's the, you know, and given that the nature of the cluster, that had this been a full development on the overall size of the land, that the land can therefore absorb the additional nitrogen without the IA system.
Okay. Further discussion.
Boy.
Comments?
All said.
All right, so we have a motion before us. We have a motion to approve the aggregate plan, which essentially codifies the 4 bedrooms. And if they wish to go above 4 bedrooms, they have to have an IA system. That's a summary of it.
Codified. Well, I think it.
I mean,
it really
I don't want to use the word codified because
yeah,
it's not a code.
I think what it says
Confirm.
is these lots are able to have traditional or regular
Title V.
Title V systems forever,
Right.
as long as they don't increase the bedrooms on any one of the individual lots.
They don't go above 4
And
bedroom capacity.
And we're saving 10,000 or 15,000 per lot or something in cost. Let's be honest.
Right.
Yeah, that's
to
right.
avoid what we're doing, and so if they have to replace the system. So,
That's fine. You said it better than I did.
but I think it's important that whatever we do, you might even want to wait. I get worried when we're working off of PowerPoints and someone later on says, well, you know, this is what Jim said, and it's not written down
Right.
in a cogent, clear way exactly what we're doing. At least I don't think it is. And I think we'd all be better off to
You want to wait?
well, yeah. I mean, if we're going to do it, and I sense we're going to do it, if that's the deal, but I think you ought to have a
Well, we could
a
go back.
regulation that's really clear, because I don't
maybe
think
we
what
might-
we've got is...
The form we submitted is not, Roberto, is not.
Well,
Yeah,
I-
this
you know,
form is
There's a
the-
form that
There's a
sure.
form in your things.
Well, Roberto, maybe we want to write the regulation for them.
How
Where
so?
it says the form, am I looking at the form? We're looking for a variance? Is that what the form is?
Yeah, so it's under. Let me read it. The cluster subdivision.
It's the first one.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first document.
No, it's actually the 4th document in the packet.
Well, it's the first.
Hammock Pond Cluster Subdivision PDF. And in the very first page is the request, and it says to allow the use of nitrogen credit land to satisfy required loading of 10,000 square feet per 110 gallons per day of sewage flow for the existing 36 4-bedroom lots within the Hammock Pond of Nantucket Cluster Subdivision.
And then there's a subsequent letter from Art.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's as long as it's clear, so
That's-
you
that to
can
me is-
operate. I mean, you got to tell us that.
Well, make
Whether
sure.
you like it or not, someone ought to make sure.
The minutes need to have that particular phrasing.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we're doing it by.
Yeah, I'll touch base with Terry.
All right. So as read is what we're voting on. All right. All in favor?
Aye. Did who second?
I
No,
You did?
we
Okay.
we had the motion.
No, I
This
made
is
the
our
motion. She
discussion.
said.
This is our discussion
All right.
period. So we have to vote. We have a suggestion that we move on, or we vote today.
Maybe I may just abstain. I'm just troubled about what we're doing now in Fisher's Landing. Also, I think we did what we did, and not sure what's going to happen to the sewering there, but that's going to change things altogether. So here, what we're saying is that I assume the water flows into Hummock Pond. Is that where the sewer flows?
Zone B technically sewers to Hummock Pond.
So
Outside of that,
right.
flows to the ocean.
So I guess what I'm still troubled with a little bit is that the bonus land, or this land over here, when you look at where the lots are, they're flowing to the pond, and they're not going through that other land. They're not. The water's not
this
being
is what I
filtered.
suggest.
So
we do,
I just
because if we do vote on this, it would only be 3 of us voting on probably a significant vote, and I'm uncomfortable about that.
That's fine.
All right. So I don't know what the Robert Rules of Orders are. Once we
He would have to rescind his
you'd have
motion.
to rescind your motion.
Okay, if that's what, I'll rescind the motion.
Fine.
Look, I think that these concerns, I feel confident. I mean, just listening to the tone of the board, you're going to have 3 votes, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I know we probably have 3 votes, but my concern is that this is potentially controversial in the sense that we have to make sure we're consistent with what we're doing on the island.
Yeah.
And I'd much prefer if the discussing was with all people present here.
Okay.
Because I think
Yeah, I
we
understand.
can't make major decisions with 3 people.
So you're going to motion to table?
So the motion is the table,
Okay.
and we'll vote on this in October.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask, is there something we should do to clarify? I mean, we've submitted the request.
What I need to do is what I want the staff is to get me the Fisher's Landing minutes and the documents that we used for Fisher's Landing and the minutes of that meeting.
We may all end up voting for this, but I am concerned about making
I
sure we're
understand.
treating people
You're right, because
equally.
this could impact
A lot of people. Listen,
another a whole lot of subdivisions coming down the road if there are some.
We don't have to solve this in September. We can do this in October. And I just want to make sure that we're comfortable and the community is comfortable, and that there is some consistency, because this is starting to get really confusing for us, to be honest with you. Because we've got multiple zones and multiple regulations, and we've got sewers coming in, we've got Title V's, we've got IA systems, we've got 64, we've got 55, and we have to go carefully.
Right, sure, I understand that.
We're going to be talking later about IA systems in Nantucket and how it affects the sewering, and we need to do this right.
We appreciate your consideration of it. As long as we don't have any, Roberto can tell me if we need to do some more.
I think you've done a good job. It's clear.
It's very clear, and but I respect my colleague, and I think I want to go back and look at Fisher's Landing. We never did the minutes the last meeting.
Yes, we accidentally skipped the minutes. That's what I was going to...
So the minutes of the last meeting, I was not at the last meeting, so therefore I can't comment or vote on them.
I think they were fine. I did go over them.
No additions.
No additions?
No.
Therefore, by unanimous consent of those individuals that were at the last meeting, those are approved.
Okay.
Okay. 280, 282, 284 Pulpus Road. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. I'll try to be brief, but what I want to try to do is sort of reiterate what's happened up to this point and where we are now.
Right.
Okay? So, again, for the record, Rhoda Weinman, as you know, I'm requesting a variance pursuant to Section 6407 for the 2 septic systems at 280 and 284 Pulpus Road, located partially within Zone A and Zone B, that are in technical failure because they don't meet the 6-foot separation, as stated in your June minutes. And the June minutes will correct. The July minutes, I just want to add, were not correct. in that it's, and I wasn't at the meeting to correct them the last time, but they stated that I was looking for under 5 feet, and I'm not looking under 5 feet, I'm looking for under 6 feet. So I just want to note that.
Well, we should make that clear.
I want to make sure that's clear in the minutes
Yeah.
today. It was clear in the June minutes, it wasn't, it was incorrect in the July minutes, okay? So the main house is 5.6 feet, and the cottage, rounded to 5, is 4.9. As the record will show, my 3-acre lots total 361,533 square feet, or 9 acres. Based on the square footage, I would be entitled to 36 bedrooms, which I believe you have in your record already. And as I represented in previous hearings, only 1 bedroom is occupied in our home that has 3 bedrooms and a 6-bedroom system. No one lives in the cottage. It was occupied for 2 weeks this summer. It's being closed shortly. That has a 3-bedroom septic system, but there's only 1 bedroom in the cottage, and we have a vacant lot that was purchased to protect the 2 lots and is not built upon and won't be built upon as long as we own it. Because of the unique situation, and I know, Mr. Chairman, I know you think everybody has a unique situation, and I respect your opinion, but I think our situation is unique. 2 people have lived there for 28 years in 1 bedroom on 9 acres, so I think that's a little different than the other 24 properties that you asked to look at. So I'm asking for a variance to allow the current septic systems to remain in place until such time as the property is on the market to be sold. And I understand that once that happens, we put in a new IA system, and that's clear to me. There's no question in my mind about that. And as a condition, if you grant me the variance, then we're willing to have it inspected every 3 years. At the first meeting on June 16th, I presented my position, and at that meeting, and I think your minutes will accurately reflect, the concern was if you granted me a variance, it would open the floodgates for others requesting the same relief. It was represented that there were 24 property owners. I think Art represented that there were 24 property areas in the Harbor Watershed District that received letters last September of 2015, which is when I received my first letter, that were in technical failure. It was stated at the meeting when I asked the question of how many have responded, I was told that I was the only one out of the 24 letters that was sent out that responded. And those letters were sent out 10 months ago. Now I've received 4 letters, as presumably everybody else on that list has received as well. And so far, I went to the health department yesterday and spoke to Ann because the concern was, again, that this was going to create opening the floodgates and everybody was going to come forward and ask for a variance. Not one person other than myself has asked for a variance, and that was as of yesterday at 3 o'clock. Now, I don't know if anything's changed today, but yesterday at 3 o'clock, I was the only one that's asked for a variance. At the July meeting, after reviewing the list of property owners, and you had asked the staff at the June meeting to give you the list of the 24 property in the Harbor Watershed District, you wanted to know the lot areas and you wanted to know, the separation. Of the 24 properties that were listed, there were only 2 that had more acreage than ours, and most of them had under a 5-foot separation. Not under 6, but under 5. And, of course, there was no way of knowing how many people occupied those. There could be, 10 people living in those houses, which would certainly contribute a lot more to the problem than 2 people living there, but there wasn't any way of knowing how many people lived there. So at the July meeting, the committee reiterated that my system failed. I'm well aware that it failed. Technically, I wouldn't be before you if it didn't fail. And I asked for the variance again. The variance criteria seemed to be lost a little bit with the discussion, though I attempted to explain that based on my situation, I believe that I met the criteria for a variance that's in your regulations. And I continue to feel even more strongly about it today because I actually hired someone to sit in my office for 5 days and do research and to contact many other municipalities, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. So the board voted at the July meeting to continue my application until today. after the September 1st deadline to determine if there were multiple requests, as everybody thought there would be, for variances. And again, there are none. I'm the only one that's asked for variance. You asked me at the last meeting whether I would be willing to do a test pit. And I thought about that a lot, and I thought about it before I agreed to do it. I hired somebody to sit in my office and call towns on the Cape, towns all over Massachusetts, towns in Rhode Island, and towns all over the country to find out, are our regulations really unique? Were they really researched, and is there really a difference between 5 feet and 6 feet? And what do other communities do, and what's the sense out there? And what I learned, and I wasn't really surprised, was that we are unique. We are the only town, the only one of all the towns in Massachusetts, and I personally talked to several on the Cape. We're the only ones that require someone in a situation like mine, where I have a septic system in both properties that work fine. It's never been a hydraulic failure. I'm not selling the properties, and yet I'm being asked to spend roughly $120,000 on 2 new systems. And I decided at that point that putting in a test pit wasn't something that I was interested in doing, because if it came out the same result as I have now, which is just under the 6 feet, then you were going to deny it anyway. That was the sense I had. If I found that I now had 6 feet, then I didn't need to be before this board. So after reviewing the information, I also made some calls and talked to a lot of people about this, and definitely our system, our rules and our regulations are unique. They're different. They're onerous. And what was shocking to most people was, and I don't know whether you've run the numbers, but I have, that if I don't put in a new system and I don't do what I'm supposed to do, the fine's $109,500 a year to pay the town, and having 2 systems that work fine with 2 people living on 9 acres. I think that's really criteria for a variance. So I would ask you to think about this, and I would ask you to make a decision now. And if you decide that you're not going to grant me a variance, then I would like a very detailed response in your minutes as to why I'm being denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, questions?
Well, our regulations might be unique, but there are regulations.
Mr. Cooper, this is the 4th time you've said this in the last 3 meetings. You keep saying, I don't meet your regulations. I'm here because I don't meet your regulations. And I think what I seem to feel that this board isn't really hearing is that you have a variance procedure. And the variance procedure relates to people that have a unique situation, and you're supposed to at least take that into consideration before you make a decision. And I don't feel like that's been happening.
Well, I apologize. I think we've listened to you and we've listened to your arguments. Other comments?
It's sort of like we're back where we started.
Yes, well, we're gonna move on. This is the last meeting we're going to have on this subject.
Yep.
It's very quiet. So, Roberta, you have a comment?
Staff comment.
By way of background, there is an application for an IA system at this property that was just approved for an IA 2 days ago. That's the only comment that I have.
Okay. Without more comments, I think we've discussed this long enough, and so I need a motion to approve or disapprove the variance for 280, 282, and 284 Pulpus Road.
No, it's 280 and 284. 282 is vacant.
282 is the unbuildable lot.
One comment I might make, Mr. Chairman, in terms
Please,
of the process here, is that given the situation, we might be well advised to discuss the written denial, if there's going to be one, with council before we adopt it. And often that's a good procedure. It benefits the board in future situations if it becomes necessary. So,
Yeah, I don't think we can guarantee a detailed written analysis till we have discussed it with council. However, we should vote.
and then we can vote, and then subject to
Yeah, yeah.
a review of the final written analysis, which we would then have to approve.
Yeah.
Okay.
But right now, we need to vote
Yeah.
and get this off or on our plate and move on. So again, I need a motion either to accept or deny the variance for 280 and 284 Pulpus Road.
I will move to deny.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, do I hear a vote? Any of the all in favor of denying, say aye.
Aye.
The chairman is actually going to vote against or vote for the variance, but because it's 2-1, the variance is denied.
Okay, and I would like a detailed decision.
Well, again,
I think as when you vote on a variance, and I think you can check this with town council, that I'm entitled to
Right.
an explanation why, because this, I'm afraid, isn't going away. So,
well,
and I think you know that because there are several people who have filed plans but are going to pursue this because you are the only, this is the only community. There was no proper notice given. There was a little notice in the paper. None of us, the thing that's so upsetting about this to most of the neighborhood is that no one knew that this was going to be discussed. No one knew that the result of your meeting in September of 2000 or August of 2015 was going to result in $100,000 for people to put in new
Well,
systems, and yet we got a letter 3 weeks later telling us that that vote was made.
the discussion
So
about,
it wasn't handled well.
discussion about, we had 3 public hearings on 64. We had a consultant come in. There was a lot of discussion about 64.
No, okay. I mean,
All right?
it's somebody else will make the decision. So let's just.
A lot of
I
discussion.
just want a detailed answer on this.
Well, we will discuss it.
Thank you.
Okay. So the vote. Just for the record, if we had approved it, I would have insisted upon sale of property, a non-technical failure, hydraulic failure, et cetera, to replace the system with an IA system.
That was what was agreed upon 2 meetings ago.
So, but the variance has been denied. We have 2 ACOs.
Yes, the 2 ACOs that are in front of you right now are for Meadowview Avenue. Both of them are 59 Meadowview Drive and 4 Meadowview Drive. They're straightforward. It's ACOs so that they can start escrowing the money for when the sewers come in. They are in a plus parcel. It's already been voting on. The sewer is coming there. They're 2 very straightforward ACOs.
Yep. Okay. We'll take. Are there any difference between the 2?
I would still,
other than address?
the precedent is that we've been taking them one by one, so I would vote, do
Okay,
individual
fine.
votes one by one.
Let's take the 59 Meadowview. I need a motion to approve the ACO.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. 59 Meadowview ACO is approved. 4 Meadowview Drive.
Okay, a motion to approve.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the ACO for 4 Meadowview Drive, say aye.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. Here I am. Uh, 109 Old South Road.
Yes, we have a request for a variance in front of us for the connection to sewer for 109 Old South Road. Oh, perfect. there is an attachment to this variance request. The requester is requesting that they do not have to be connected to town sewer until said time that the house is sold, the current property owner passes, or upon the failure. So I believe the representative of the property is here today. So please just.
My name's Joe Bunting. I'm representing my mother, Mary Glowacki. She can't be here today. She's actually 99 and 5 months old, so she's still able to get out and around, but she's asked me to represent her here. So it's emotionally upsetting to her, first of all, and financially. She's starting to require care. She has property, but she's not going to sell the property in order to pay off these things, and she doesn't want to go in debt. So that's my story. I just asking the board for some compassion in this regard. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Any questions from the board? Discussion?
One, what did you say, that if she passes, then
Yes, when she passes, or it gets sold, which is unlikely, but you never know what's going to happen in life. So,
what about something like?
But more so probably when she passes.
If she passes, it's sold, or system fails.
Or if the system fails, would be the third condition.
Some time limitation.
Right. So there's three timelines.
I mean, I hate to discuss passing, but
I know.
I
hate to even say it. I hope she never hears the.
It was 106. So.
Well, we hope she lives to 106.
I hope she makes it to 106 too.
I think the oldest I've heard is 117. So.
Wow. Any comments from the board? I would.
So this is primarily a financial issue, I gather. I mean, just so I understand.
Health, financial, the whole thing.
Yeah.
The system hasn't failed, though, right?
No, the system
when
has
was
not
it last
failed.
inspected?
But if
I don't
it does
believe the
fail, then
system's
I
failed.
would be able to probably talk her into doing it. But
Right.
Yeah, I
that
don't
would
believe
be the other
system's failed.
criteria. If it failed, then we'd have to.
Is it in an
There'd
area?
be no choice in the matter, actually.
Is it in an area where inspections are required?
It's in the
well, we
wellhead.
have it checked by somebody. Anyway,
When was it inspected? Do we know?
I don't have the file with me, but to my knowledge, it has not failed, and I believe it's George Hughes who.
yeah. So last time I think he pumped it out last.
Exactly, and to our knowledge, he hasn't said anything.
You don't
to
know
us
how
either.
long ago?
I honestly don't know how long. Not off the top of my head right now.
I think it was a year ago.
Okay.
Oh, a year ago.
Okay.
I'd be comfortable with something like till she passes, the house is sold, it fails, or if none of that happens within 5 years.
I could accept that.
Something like that.
Yes, that's fair.
So there is some time limit on it.
That's okay.
You know.
At that point, probably somebody would be taking charge of
I would think by then,
her finances or whatever. So in 5 years.
5 or 3 years, I don't know. Discussion.
I don't know what the timeline should be, but I agree there should be a timeline, or if she passes or something like
Yeah,
that.
there should be a timeline.
Just to be clear, we're outside of the Harbor Watershed District.
Yes, outside
Yes.
of the watershed.
Just wanna be clear.
Yeah, it's only the only
Yeah,
protection
that's
it has is
important.
wellhead.
We're not in these watershed discussions
Mhm.
that
I
drive
just-
me nuts.
Yeah,
Okay.
but let's.
Yeah, no, I know that.
Let's take advantage of what we have.
Yes.
Listen, why can we say that we will give her stay until the next inspection period?
There's no inspection.
There's
That's
There's
not a good
there's
idea.
no inspections
No,
at
that's
all?
not a
Oh,
good
okay.
idea.
yeah, there is no inspection.
5 years, 3 years.
Whatever.
Well, I mean, I guess 3 is better than 5 from our point of view.
All right,
If
so
it's
I
comfortable,
would
and
like to hear a motion.
And
for-
you can come back at the end of the 3 and redo it.
That
you know?
sounds
Then
fine.
we get
So
something done.
I'd like 5 if you could.
I would suggest that someone make a motion that we grant the variance with the conditions that if the system fails, the house is sold, the lady passes, and that this has to be readdressed, and the variance is only good for 3 years.
How many years?
3.
But they
All right,
can come back at the end of 3
Okay.
and do it again.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Chairman says aye.
Thank you so much.
17 Columbus Avenue.
Yes, so 17 Columbus is a variance requested in front of you for the distance required from a leaching facility to a basement. It is a pretty straightforward variance, and I believe the representative for the property is here.
Hello, my name is Matthew McEachern, and I'm representing the owner. So basically it's a pre-existing structure. It's a 5-bedroom septic, and we're looking to do an addition. And the addition doesn't comply with the 20-foot setback. There's kind of limited area where we. There's a limited area where we could actually do the addition. So we're before you to seek a variance.
So, as the staff looks at this, is this given the construction that's going to take place, which that's another question, but assuming that's what's going to happen, is this the least, what's the phrase we like to use?
The maximum feasible compliance.
Feasibility possible? What else can you do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you granted a variance earlier because the system failed and it went up front, and you can see it's closer to the house than it was in the past. They're putting this addition on that's further away from, I believe, the system than the original variance was granted for. I mean, in the big picture, they can service things. I don't see why it's a huge issue.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So there was an original variance for this lot?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for that system.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's one question out there.
Thanks. Bruce Mandel, Nantucket. I came here to speak with you about some of the considerations you're going to have in a moment about the sewer issues. This one popped on my radar screen, not so much because of the particulars of the variance being requested, but this particular property is in the proposed sewer district. And as you can see in that plan, it's at an elevation and pretty close to Long Pond. And I'm not going to get into the science of the leaching and whatever, but my concern is this. And again, it's not to this particular process, it's to the property, it's to the process. My understanding is the staff has denied this request, and that's why we're here. Is that right?
No, this is a different one. This is just
a variance request.
Yeah, this one is just a variance from the
pardon me.
State Title V.
So my concern is we've got about 111 failed systems in Nantucket out of 574. Not all 574 of those systems are in the proposed sewer area, unfortunately. But if we're going to establish a precedent in one of the lots that is in the proposed sewer area, my concern is what's going to happen as a precedent to these 111 failed systems when they start coming forward. And I'd just like you to take a step back and look at the process, perhaps, not necessarily as it relates to 17 Columbus, one of my neighbors, but in terms of what it means to Nantucket on the whole, especially with what we're dealing with this sewer issue and what we're asking to happen. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Additional questions? Additional comments?
Did it, other than this separation issue, the system has functioned properly?
Too hard.
It's not.
Yeah, it passes.
It's not in failure condition or anything.
No, it passes.
Just want to be clear about that.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't be able to issue the building permit otherwise.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't have a problem.
I don't need it. Other comments? And then I need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Let's approve the variance for 17 Columbus.
Yep.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. Variance is granted.
Thank you very much.
Appeal of a well permit denial. I didn't understand this.
Yes. So this one is a well that was installed on.
Could I interrupt? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the applicant, Art Gasparo, could I request that this be held over to your meeting next month when you have a full board?
I have no problem with that.
So, thank you.
Anyone on the board has an objection to holding this over?
Thank you.
Okay.
I was confused about it myself, so. Okay, this is...
Can I just ask a question about that? We'll come back, but is there water in Delaney Road?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so IA systems and sewer area discussion.
Yes. So
this is a discussion. This isn't for any opinions or anything. Or it's full of opinions but no decisions. Is because we're going to get into this issue of people who've invested significant amounts of money in IA system, either because they wanted more bedrooms or they care about the environment. It doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have to start dealing with this
soon.
Does this tie into 13 just before we get started?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't know if they were similar.
Well, this is more of a discussion. 13, I was wondering if the board would be, as a group, to support the warrant for the sewer in Nantucket coming up.
Well,
that's
you got
12.
that down on...
That's 12.
That's 12.
It's 12.
13 is the continuing discussion of the policy that we were originally discussing at the last meeting about the distance to the sewer.
Oh, okay.
That one is just a continuation so that we can hash out some of the questions
so
that
that's
were...
a different question.
Yes.
That's a different question.
Yes,
this
that's a different
is a discussion of, because we're going to have, well, we have to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to comment?
Yes. So the reason this is on the agenda here is there is a significant amount of discussion and significant amount of commentary about how we've required IA systems in a lot of areas that are going to be eventually sewered. One of them being Nantucket, the other one's being the watershed area. So some of these systems costing $69,000, $70,000, $100,000 to be installed. Which is a significant investment, as you all know, which is significantly more than what the connection to sewer is going to be. So what the conversation has evolved into is, as the Board of Health, we have the regulation, we have the control of how long people have to connect to sewer once sewer becomes available. Our regulation 69 requires 6 months if you're in a watershed, or 2 years if you're not in a watershed district. So the discussion here is to see what the pleasure of the board will be in regards to people who have IA systems already. Once the sewer comes available, especially in some of the plus areas where there are some properties in the plus areas, I believe Ms. Well has brought it up to my attention as well, that some of these systems were installed just this past year. And now with Plus being the first section sewered, they may have sewer within the next 1.5 to 2 years. So it would seem a little unjust to have them install an IA system this year just to have them tear it out 2 years later to connect to sewer. So the discussion would be where the board would be in this.
Well, the board, again, we would be faced with never-ending variances, requesting not to get hooked up. And then there's also the issue that I think at some point has to be discussed with the Board of Selectmen is, do these people get some kind of break on a hookup, for example, just as an example?
You mean on the hookup fees?
On the hookup fees, because this
which aren't very substantial compared to the overall situation.
Right.
But that's a conversation that can be had.
I think this conversation needs to be had because I think we owe it to the public to let them know what's coming ahead for them. And we have to start getting our head around this because we're going to have to deal with it.
Is this discussion going to be retroactive to the people within the last 2 years that have put IA systems in before the sewer was even discussed?
It's to whoever we decide to.
It's however.
Yeah, right now we're just discussing it. If we were to make a regulation, we would need to have an open hearing. If we were to just make an internal policy, we can always do that as well. But in this case, we're doing it just as a discussion so that I can get the sense of what the board is, so that I can draft something to bring towards the board here.
Is there also a possibility of extending hookup period, let's say 5 to 8 years?
Yes.
In addition to waiving hookup fees? I mean, just...
The waiving the hookup fees, we don't have jurisdiction over as the Board of Health. That would be the Board of Selectmen, but hookup time frame is what we have jurisdiction over.
Well, the thing is, if you take Nantucket, how many houses are we talking? How many hookups would we have in Nantucket?
We're looking at approximately, 550 or 570 or so?
So you couldn't say to everybody in Nantucket, you have to hook up the sewer in 6 months because there isn't enough people to physically do that kind of work in 6 months.
With the regulation, the way we've been approaching the regulation is that they at least begin the work, pulling the permit, showing us proof that they're starting the work on it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody physically has to.
Yeah.
But there's, so I think we need to think through a little bit what's going on here. Sometimes it's helpful to make for the discussion to make up some numbers. If there were, for example, 500 lots in Nantucket that are going to be sewered, and if there were 200 IA systems, and we wanted to give them 10 years leeway, just to pick some numbers to have some discussion about, you'd start to say, well, gee, that's interesting. That's almost half the hookups, and half the benefit of sewers would not come through then for 10 years. And you might say, gee whiz, that's a little long.
Yeah, why do we do it anyway?
Why do you do that? So it opens up that kind of discussion. Right. And the magnitude, if there were 2 of these, that's one thing. What are there, 50-some? What's
there
the
are 69 in Nantucket. 69.
Well, 69 of 500 is to me a pretty big hunk. And if you take the cost of Nantucket per house and said it's $75,000 that all the taxpayers are going to pay, and you take out 69, the cost per house is 95, or whatever the hell the number is, and you get I don't know, maybe you get 70% of the benefit. I don't know the numbers here. So the fact that the taxpayer's picking up the bulk of the cost, not all of the cost, because the property owner has to pay for the line and the connection and the whatever. There are costs that sort of depends where my sense of Nantucket Harbor, the argument went those who didn't want to pay said that's going to be $50,000, because they wanted to make sure the taxpayer picked up the tab. And others would say, if you all get together and do it right, it's only going to be $10,000. So there's a wide variety of opinion on what the actual costs are going to be. And it depends if the house is 500 feet back from the road or if it's 10 feet back from the road. In Nantucket, they're all very close. So all these things are part of the discussion. So I'm not sure where that takes us, but I
don't know where it takes us anywhere, and maybe this discussion's not going anywhere, but we need to think about this, please.
Clearly we do, but that's why I wanted to get some of the issues out there so we start sort of working them through.
And I'm a numbers guy. I like your numbers analogy.
I came here tonight to speak to you about the sewer issues. And unfortunately for us, several of your agenda items kind of all fall into that category, and this is one of them. One of the reasons Article number 1 was submitted by the citizens group to defer the consideration of the sewer from October to April was to allow time for questions that haven't been answered or issues that haven't been resolved to be addressed so we have a better handle on what's going on. We're asking the taxpayers to pay approximately $125,000 per property to sewer Nantucket. We've also asked some of my neighbors to put in as recently as October of last year, an IA system so they could occupy their house. It cost my neighbor close to $70,000. We're currently installing an IA system on the other side of Long Pond, within 30 to 50 feet of the water an IA system because, hey, they're allowed to do that. And unfortunately, they have not been included in the sewer district, even though their effluent is flowing in that direction. And the issue becomes exactly what you're talking about. How do you deal with people who have gone through a great expense to protect the property, protect the environment, protect the watershed, and now we're going to ask them to abandon that system, destroy it, and to connect to the sewers in some time frame? As you said, 3 months, or 2 months, 6 months, and then people can come before you and say, I would like a waiver until I can connect or till I sell the property. I can have a waiver for 5 years, 10 years, indefinitely, and you have to consider it. And as I understand it right now, the Board of Health considers those carefully on a case-by-case basis. And one of the open issues that we have, and we've got about 50 of them now, that we'd like to get addressed that are important, this is one of them. How do you compensate people, and why is it a case-by-case kind of arbitrary thing, discussions and whatnots and lawyers and this one's and that one's, when instead we feel it would be better if there was a set policy. This is how we deal with this situation. This is how long you can apply for a variance or a waiver, and this is how long you get to hook up. And so I'm just mentioning this under this category. You happen to hit one of our open issues, so I thought I would throw our 2 cents in here. This is a really important issue to an awful lot of people in Nantucket, and I can't speak to the rest of the island. So I would urge you to come up with a firm policy rather than kind of a case-by-case thing. And I think it would make your life a lot easier, too, if you had a firm policy.
It reminds me, another possibility if we're going to do this is, you decide a start year, and maybe everybody gets 10 years off the start date, and so wherever you are now, they get. If they did it last year, they got 9 more years. If you use 10 years, if they did it 10 years ago, they don't get anything. So there are a lot of possibilities here.
Which is why we're asking for this hiatus, so we can figure some stuff out.
Yeah. Well, I'm strongly in favor of the sewer, first of all. I can't argue with that.
No one's saying not to put
And I got a little upset when I heard that people were talking about delaying this and doing more study. But I think this.
That's not what we're talking about.
No, let me finish. There's been people discussion in delaying the vote, for example. I think that was in your warrant 1 or whatever.
Warrant 1 is to defer the vote. It doesn't mean stop the process.
No, that's what I used there. I mean defer. Mm-hmm. And then the more I've been thinking about this, I don't think we need so much more scientific work. A lot of people say we have to do more scientific studies. I think we've done enough scientific studies. It's these kinds of issues that are beginning to worry me a little bit. And I don't know we're going to get them resolved between now and the town meeting.
Well, you're sure not going to get them resolved between now and October 17th.
That's what I mean.
And this is part of the reason why it's prudent to take some time to try to resolve not just this issue. And there are several other health-related issues. But it's prudent to take the time to do that. And by deferring the decision, the vote, doesn't mean you defer the process. You continue to develop your plans and the process. And if you want, I can get into this when you come to the agenda item. But let me make this very clear. Article 1 is not meant to say no sewer. Nantucket is very much in favor of protecting the eelgrass and the groundwater and the watershed. And we understand the need for a sewer.
Right. I think we understand that. Okay. Thank you. Now, where are we going?
I just want to ask one question. If we defer this, if this thing gets deferred at town meeting, what happens if it keeps getting deferred, and 2019 comes, and Nantucket's not signed up, and we lose a zero interest rate, and the state says, it's still a mandate, you still got to do it, now go get your money on your own, or pay the interest rate?
That's a good question, and that's one of our questions.
And that the problem is, we can probably defer it to, April.
Let me address your question, though. The state revolving fund subsidy that makes the 0% financing. In other words, it's not a 0% financing. There's an interest rate, and the state subsidizes it so it comes down to zero.
Right.
That's an annually rebirthing process. And for the cycle that we're in right now, we have already applied, the town has already applied to obtain that subsidy. There are two other thresholds to be met. One is in July and one is in October. This is the same cycle we went through for the Nantucket Harbor, where we voted at an annual town meeting in the spring and still qualified in July and in October.
Okay, let's move on. I want to get back to our health issues here.
I'm trying to answer his question.
I know, but I don't want to get into the whole rediscussion again. I think from the point
is you're not going to lose your 0% financing opportunity by waiting a couple of months to answer some questions.
Okay.
My question is, and what I want the board to think about is how we're going to deal with this issue. The Regulation 64 people, the IA systems, and because that specifically is what this board will have to deal with. A lot of the other issues about financing and timing, that's not my issue.
And that's why I got up to speak to your specific issue.
Right, my issue is this. So you have suggestions, staff, Roberto?
There are a couple things that can happen. One, we can make a blanket policy where we can say if your IA was installed before or after 2014, then you would have until 2019 to connect it. Or whatever. We can say it's something like that. The other option is we continue to do it on a case-by-case basis, which
I'm not sure we want to do that.
So we might review what we did at Dukes Road.
Yes.
It's not exactly similar, but I think Dukes was in the Hummock Pond watershed, not?
They were somewhere in Hummock Pond, somewhere in the harbor.
Somewhere. So it's a mixed bag. Mm-hmm. But we went through an exercise and we gave them another year or whatever we did to hook up.
Right.
Which is helpful. But if it's if the hookup costs on Dukes Road were on average, $15,000, you're just letting them save up some money for a year.
That's essentially what we did.
And that's helpful, but it's not delaying it too much.
Exactly.
If you start getting into, we ought to have a delay that's significant. First of all, I think some people are looking for more than just delay, in the sense that a delay, they're going to have to pay the money, and their investment that they've already made is moot. It's gone.
Right.
So I'm not sure what they really want or expect. But delay, I think, is the only thing we could provide that I've heard about.
As far as the hill.
But we could provide, let's understand, a delay for 20 years. I'm not saying we should, but that gives that property owner a much longer period of time to amortize his investment. And so we're dealing with some of these types of questions. And Dukes Road is
good example.
What we did in one case.
Right. Well, the one thing we can do is timing.
Yes.
Hookup fees and other costs, we have no control.
We have no say over that.
That's all we can do, I think.
That's all
we haven't come up with any other recommendation that the Board of Health can act on, other than
it's the sense of the board that we want to do property by property, or
no?
Thank you.
The only thing we have control over once the sewer is there is the length of time it takes to connect, delay.
I just think, as tough as this is, the longer you wait, the less the benefit of sewering. So
Agreed.
I don't disagree with
we're
you.
dealing with a really hard-nosed issue. I've had some people say to me, the taxpayer's picking up 85% of the bill already. And, we're talking about the small portion of the bill that's going to be paid sometime. And, in effect, the interest cost on delaying that at, 5% a year on 15,000 is, by the time you delay 5 years, it's $1,500 or whatever the hell the number is. So that's what we're talking about.
Variance, the other consideration is the sewer is there, supposed to connect. When you connect, there are monthly sewer charges. When you allow them to wait 2, 3, 4, 5 years to help amortize the cost of their expensive IA system, they are also avoiding those monthly sewer charges. So there's a benefit there that, as part of the work group that we're proposing for Article 1, we need to discuss that so that everyone understands that it's not a punishment to connect to the sewer at a certain point of time. And if you do get a privilege of not connecting right away, there's also a benefit to you as the property owner.
That is not entirely true. If you have an IA, you have to do an operation and maintenance agreement. Those operation and maintenance agreements are about $1,800 a year, plus water testing, plus pumping of the system.
An IA system is, the expense isn't finished just when you put it in. There's significant maintenance involved.
There's a lot of maintenance that goes with an IA.
So what we basically have to do is we have to set a time limit for when the sewer's in for someone to take the permit out. The permit has to be taken out
within.
Get on a list but the permit has to be taken out with a certain amount of time. That's one of the things we have to do. And the second thing I think we have to do is figure out how much time we're going to give IA people, and we can simplify that. So there's two big things we have to do.
The first one that you mentioned is something we're already doing. Right now, if you're within one of the watersheds, you have 6 months to connect. If you're not, you have 2 years to connect. And the way we've been doing it is we know that there's only 2 installers that can do it. So as long as we get a letter from them or an email, just a simple email from them that says, this address, and that address is in our list, and we're going to be getting to them as soon as we can.
Right.
We're marking them in compliance.
But you're not going to do 500 people.
Yeah, we already know it's going to take 2 years because there are only so many you can do. And that's
right.
Whatever it is, it
but
is.
As long as they've taken the permit out and they're on the list, then I think that's all.
On the other hand, someone could get together and we could import 6 workers and have a group process and get them all hooked up in 6 months. I mean, you could do things like that.
No, you could.
Okay, let's move on. I think there's a general consensus here. I don't want to overstate something.
Okay, so I will get to work on a policy. I will forward it out.
Think about a policy. Maybe we can discuss it next meeting.
Okay.
A very simple policy.
Absolutely.
Very simple policy.
Yes.
And Roberta, can you get a list of how many IA systems are going to be in the sewer district? And,
yes.
And the dates that they were installed, the ones that are in now?
We can. Is that already on Barnstable County's thing?
I think that's an important factor to determining your timeline.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
I think we already.
We need that list to look at that list.
Yeah, I think we already have that data. It's just a matter of collating it.
It'll probably be some kind of a floating timeline or something.
Right.
We already have that list. It's just we just have to collate that data.
To just ask a question, though. Sorry to prolong it, but if you don't
That's
mind.
all right.
Pippin's Way was mentioned earlier.
Yes.
So did I hear that they have IAs in Pippin's Way?
They're actually the ones that aren't done in construction have to connect the sewer once it comes in. They're okay.
So here I assume they're picked up like anybody else. Just so we're clear.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not making. This isn't just a Mattocket.
This isn't just Mattocket.
No, this is everybody. That's why I wanted a list of when they were put in.
Okay. Thank you. So staff has marching orders, and if we could have it in October.
Will do.
Because we can discuss that policy and see if if we're all comfortable with it. Next item is, do we formally endorse the warrant for sewer small thing to do, but it'd be nice in the discussion to say that the Board of Health supports Nantucket sewering. I'm not going to get into times. I'm not going to get into delaying the votes, but just the concept. Because I think it's important that we send the message to the community that we support this.
Just so you understand, I feel that there are options here that haven't been discussed, and I'm not a flat-out sewer Nantucket no matter what. I mean, I have been concerned that our consultants are on a track, and they don't look to either side.
Okay.
The only thing I want to say
That's
is
just me.
I remember someone standing up from Nantucket at the last town meeting, and when we were voting on the sewer from Monomoy, and they said, before we vote on this, people from Nantucket, we would like to know that in the October meeting for the Nantucket sewer, if we vote for the Monomoy, we want the town to make sure that the Nantucket sewer happens if it gets voted on. I remember the guy standing up and saying that, and they said, okay, don't worry about it. So what's going to be complicated is someone from Nantucket now is going to get up and ask him not to vote on it.
Well, I know you have, you can
Yeah,
vote,
so
you can endorse this or not, but we can discuss ourselves.
Okay.
Right. I mean, the only other, you talk about alternative systems. The only alternative to this, if we close the summer visitors down and we take about half the present population and move them off the island, that would solve all our problems. But we can't. So the question is, does the board want to formally endorse?
I would like to.
I want
support
to.
it.
I want to too, and the gentleman to my left can abstain or vote against. Yes, really quick now. 2 seconds. I mean, I'm talking about 2 seconds.
It's going to be a little more.
Because I'm being not. I mean, I really don't even have to let anyone speak. I'm just being a nice guy.
I'm going to hold something up here for you to see before you vote. Every property you see highlighted there has been excluded from this sewer district.
That's fine.
Hold on.
No,
This is really important.
You've got 1 minute because.
Okay.
Because I don't want to.
Two of the properties that are excluded are at the water measurement stations.
Fine.
We're asking that if we're going to sewer, something that you want, something that a lot of people want, if we're going to sewer, let's do the whole job and sewer. And the only way to do that now, because the warrant article's been written, is to bring this up in April.
All right.
And
I
include
don't
all
wanna
these
bring this up
properties.
Thank you.
And that's just one of 45 issues.
Well, I don't want to hear all 45
Well,
issues.
okay.
I want to get the sense of the board, and the details of it will come out in the warrant article, or amendments to the warrant article, or more warrant articles.
All we're asking you is we want to do a sewer, but we want to get all these issues resolved.
Fine. That's not what we're voting on here. We're voting on, does the Board of Health support the warrant article of sewering Nantucket? Period. That's all I'm asking.
Which is number 2 in the warrant. That's the one that funds the deal, just so we know.
Okay. We'll hear a
You
motion.
might as well be
I make a
voting on
motion.
something specific.
I make a motion.
All right. That we will officially support
Article 2.
Article 2. And all in favor? I say aye.
Aye.
You're abstaining?
I'll vote no.
You'll vote no. That's, well, fine. And we're missing another person. So the majority of the Board of Health supports Article 2. Not the whole board.
Okay.
Connection of sewer policy discussion.
Yes. So at the last meeting, we had discussed a.
I wasn't the last meeting, so you're going to really have to update me.
Yes. So I had brought up I had brought up to the board a policy to connect a sewer that laid out a series of distances that would require that can be approved in-house as far as variances go to connect to the sewer or to the board. I believe it was if you were within 200 feet of the sewer line that is available and abutting your property, you must connect. If you're between 201 feet and 500 feet, you would have to request the Board of Health's approval. But if you were over 500 feet away from the sewer line, it would be an automatic waiver to the sewer. At last meeting, there was a significant amount of discussion regarding that policy. Mr. Cooper brought up some very salient points about how some of the properties in the newer sewer area in Shimo, sometimes the house is 1,000 feet away from the sewer line because they want to be by the water and the sewer line's out on the road. They would automatically have been exempted from this, which would, in essence, void the concept of why we're bringing sewer out there in the first place. So I just wanted to bring it up again on this for this meeting so that we can formally accept or deny that policy. Because the general idea was there were not enough people to make that vote. Mr. Visco also provided that same information, and I believe at the time that we were going to vote, we were down to a 3-member board.
Yes, but is this written out somewhere?
I had written it out, and it is in last meeting's packet, but I will email it out to you again.
I hate to do it again, that we're going to have to put this to the next meeting, because I haven't read it.
Okay.
I like to get things done. But unfortunately, I think this is the third thing we've put off.
Sounds good.
So if you could send that for me so I can read something
do that right
before
now.
I vote on it, I would certainly appreciate it.
Sounds good.
Just to be clear, my recollection from the conversation also was that the Old South Roads properties were part of this.
Yes,
they've already been taken care of. So, as you read it, that's in your mind.
Well,
exactly.
We can, after I read it and vote on it, or we can edit it when we vote on it in the October meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay. I'm sorry I wasn't here, but venison donation program.
So it's that time of the year again.
Yes.
We're looking into venison donation programs. The food pantry is excited to accept donations again. To my knowledge, the donor is also available to provide the funding. So right now we're just waiting to hear back from the processor, and once we hear back from the processor, we'll be able to fully post and say.
I just need to confirm that the finances of it, and last I spoke it was okay, but I think we need to get you together with the donor.
Sounds good.
Did we make any headway, or are we going to pursue people letting other people hunt on their property?
We haven't heard back from Mass Audubon yet. We did send that letter to them. They said that they would be taking it into consideration, and we haven't heard back since then. I can connect with Audubon to see where they stand on that. But as of right now, it is still status quo. What we are trying to do is to get the venison program up and running before archery season so that we can lengthen to include the entire season this time, to increase the amount of the processing. We're looking forward to it.
I hope we increase the take.
Yes, I hope so.
We were late getting into it last year.
We were a little late getting into it. It took a little bit to get the approval from the state and to get all the members on board between the funding for the refrigerator or the freezer and whole 9 yards. A lot of logistics. But this year we are ready and up and running. We just need the approval from the processor.
I'll try to get it, if we could firm it up this week.
Sounds good.
And it's going to be bow and arrow too?
Yep, it'll be all archery.
So how many weeks is that going to be?
It'll be from October 15th or so, I believe, all the way through to December 31st.
Okay. Director's report, sir.
Yes. So just really quick, we're making headway on a lot of this, on a lot of the policies and regarding the inspections in the watersheds and the technical failures, hydraulic failures, things like that. We were able to get all of the letters out for the needs inspections letter, the Nantucket Harbor watershed that we require their inspections within a certain time frame. We were able to get those reminders out this week. We were able to get all the we got all the technical failure letters out, and we've got all those operation and maintenance agreement fines. As of right now, correct me if I'm wrong, as of right now, all of the operation and maintenance agreements for all of the IAs are still in compliance. So we have 100% compliance in the O&Ms right now. That is a Herculean effort by the part of the staff. It took a while. So
had there been people before that who were not?
Oh, yes.
Who didn't have contracts?
Oh, yes.
How could it be? Okay.
Yeah. Wow. We ended up having almost all the systems that were put in let their contracts expire.
I didn't realize it was that.
Yeah.
But thank you.
So we had to track them all down one by one. Once that first letter came out, it got a lot of people's responses. And then by the third letter, and once the fines started coming out there, it made us it made a significant difference. The only issue that we're running into right now is so far is a matter of actually addresses. We work off of the GIS and the assessors database, and they update their database much slower than we're tracking these. So a lot of times we're actually sending letters to previous owners or to owners that no longer exist. So those are the only logistical issues that we're trying to figure out right now.
I'm just sort of curious. Since we implemented the regulation, have there been that many turnovers that you've picked up? I mean, 5, 10, or do you have a rough sense?
Are you talking about IAs being installed on like turnover?
Right. I'm trying to get a sense for. I mean, one of the major discussion points we had was to require this on the turnover of a property.
Right.
And
was 25 in the Nantucket Harbor watershed since September 1st. Wow. But that's increased since that time.
It just seems like a fairly big number compared to the total. I mean, that's a lot of property. So if you go out over 10 years, we're going to pick up a lot of people that way.
It's the program once implemented and tracked correctly was very well. It's working. We'll put it that way. It's working, and we're really looking forward to getting this up and running, and it's still up and running and maintaining it. The easiest thing to do is once we get to the goal is let it falter again. Now we're entering that maintenance plateau with these operation and maintenance agreements, and it's a significant amount of work to make sure we keep that level up there. So we're moving forward. I also started. We have a intern right now who is helping us with the biodegradable packaging, and one of the things she is doing is she is actually speaking with vendors as needed, telling them, providing the flyers, giving them the actual equipment that is in compliance, and explaining compliance and talking to every one of them. So we received some resistance right now, but once that grace period is over next week, I believe it's going to be the same thing as the O&Ms. It's just a matter of maintenance at that point, once everyone comes into compliance.
What about people going to the dumps? Is DPW aware?
So DPW is able to act. The good parts about the biodegradable plastics, the polylactic acid, our recycling facility is able to handle that as recyclables as well as a compostable. Okay. So we have capacity for both. So if somebody accidentally throws it into the recycling facility, our facility can still handle it, which is fabulous. So what you're looking for when you buy something from Cumberland Farms or from Stop and Shop or something, you're looking for a 5 or a 7. The 5 is polypropylene, which is considered dishwasher safe, microwave safe, things like that. So it's considered reusable as part of our regulation. And then the 7 is the polylactic acid, which is the biodegradable plastic. So you're looking for a 5 or a 7. 1 through 4 and 6s are a no-go. You'll see polystyrene a lot. People don't realize that the 5 with a PS underneath it is still styrofoam. It's the same chemical structure as styrofoam. It's just there's no air injected into it. So that's the part that we're just having trouble explaining to some people. But we're moving forward, and compliance is high already. So we're really happy. And I'm really proud of our staff, and in this past year, it's been very, very great. So it's been a pleasure working.
Good. Anything else?
I'm good.
I'm good too.
I thought it was a short meeting today.
Yeah. All right, so if I hear no objections, the meeting is adjourned.